Hi, I'm Caroline Brunne. I am the survivor coach, and I have had the pleasure of being on the online prosperity show today. We have chatted about so many things, what it looks like to be a trauma survivor or a survivor of child sexual abuse, what you can do as a parent or caregiver to empower your children and keep them safe, and also what it looks like when we have peer support and safe spaces where survivors can connect and seek support within their peer community. That's just a taste. This is a long one, but stick around, maybe go make that beverage that you need and enjoy the episode.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we have a truly remarkable guest with us. Get ready to be inspired by Caroline Brunne, a survivor coach, breathwork facilitator, author, and professional speaker. Now, Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited. I'm feeling some big energy today.
Well, absolutely. Well, first of all, did I say your last name correct? Brunne, or is it?
Almost. It's Brunne.
Brunne, fantastic. You see, it's most of those things where we would have been halfway through the show and you'd be still hung up on the fact, hey, that wasn't my name. But that's not what we're here for. Guys, if you're watching this right now, I want you to know that Caroline has transformed her harrowing experiences of incest, child sexual abuse, and domestic violence into a beacon of hope and healing for others. She's not just about surviving. She's about thriving and empowering others to do the same. And I just encourage you to maybe grab your favorite beverage right now. It could be a kombucha, a whiskey, or an orange juice, or water. And I want you to settle in, because this woman you're about to meet is not just about surviving, but about soaring. Now, Caroline, we've already introduced you to the show. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey and how you actually became a survivor coach and breathwork facilitator.
I have had what I would call many lifetimes in a lifetime. And, I feel like I'm still pretty young, so I've probably got a few more to go in my future. But I think there are a few parallels that have happened in my life. And I think many people that are listening to this or watching this will understand that we have our lived experiences that we have that are behind closed doors. There may be things that have happened in our childhood. There may be things that have happened at different stages of our lives, maybe that are happening now in our day-to-day lives. And then there are our careers and the things we put on the highlight reel, our successes. And when I bundle those all together, I have had an incredibly interesting, fulfilling life. I've had lots of different career chapters in different paid career capacities, and also as an entrepreneur of different businesses over the years. But what I have done in the last 4 years is I have merged my lived experience, which, as you've already shared, has some really difficult trauma-related experiences. And most of those come from my childhood, but have had a ripple effect into my adult life. And I've taken my business skills and communication skills and human skills to then lead into this work as a trauma survivor coach. So for me, it was probably always written that I was supposed to be here. And I just needed to do my own personal healing to be able to create space to support others. Someone I know, and my breathwork trainer, he says that we only take people as far as we can go, and like as far as we are willing to go ourselves. And for me, I have gone very far, and I have pushed some really difficult trauma related boulders and carried them and tried to break them down so they're not as big and heavy and rigid. And I've done that work so I can then support others as they do that. And so that's like, I can tell you lots of different versions of lots of different stories, and we may share some of those of different career highlights and things I've done and different businesses I've owned and had over the years. You know of some of them because we've been connected for a while, but the reality is, the biggest success I have had is acknowledging that I need to heal and that it is an ongoing journey, and I will continue to do the work for myself so I can create space so others can do the same.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking us into that part of your journey. I recently believe to whom much is given, much is required. And so many people don't quite grasp and get that, because now, based on your lived experience, you are now helping others navigate their own experiences. But, for us to set the stage, you've survived some soul shattering abuse, trauma, and grief. Maybe you could just give us a highlight of what that was like, and you know how you went through all of that.
Yeah. So I guess looking back now, I was abused as a child, and so that in itself is pretty, it's significantly life-changing. We know that here in Australia that close to 30% of Australians have experienced some form of child maltreatment or abuse. So I know that I'm not alone in this lived experience, and out of that 30%, the majority of those are have experienced some form of child sexual abuse. So I respect the fact that my story isn't actually all that unique, and that is sad, but it's also a really important point to share, because when you think 30% is really high, right? And so there will be someone, probably many someones, who are listening to this and may have expected to hear my business journey or whatever, and now we're talking about this, and it may bring some stuff up for them because it may be their lived experience as well. But the reason I share that is because the reason I do this work is so others don't feel as alone, and they realize that there are many of us, and we can all come together and support each other. But yes, as I said, I was abused as a child, and the complexity of my story is that I wasn't removed from the environment that I was in when I disclosed to to the adults in my life. So I remained in our family setting for decades, and it was only in 2020 that I started speaking publicly, and really started to unlock a lot of doors and armor that I had around me and this story. There was a really complicated component to that, because for me, I had spent a long part of my life trying not to share this part of my story. I'd worked really hard to have multiple successes in different careers, in different businesses, and whatever else. And the reality is, if you Google my name, like, you'll find that I've been on TV and I've been on podcasts and I've won awards and I've done some awesome stuff, and I'm so proud of that work. But I was almost like on a hamster wheel. So if I just kept succeeding, then maybe no one would ever need to know that I had been through something as traumatic as I had. And then the reality is that, in addition to the fact that I had had this childhood trauma and then the ongoing ripple effect of being in that fairly toxic environment, I then, as a young adult, experienced domestic violence with a previous partner. So it was just this ongoing, there was just, under the surface of all the success that everyone was seeing, there was some horrific stuff happening. And it really shows the testament of how, as human beings, we are so much more resilient than people give us credit for. And in the past 4 years, as I've been talking about my story publicly, I've had people that knew me when I was experiencing the domestic violence, or knew me as a child or a teenager or whatever else. And they're just like, how? Like, we wouldn't have ever known. And it was because I was and still am a high functioning trauma survivor. I worked out very quickly that I didn't want to be, when I saw trauma survivors or abuse survivors in the media, or in media related mediums like TV or movies or whatever else, they were broken, and they were, had issues with substance abuse, and they had terrible relationships, and they couldn't have a career, and the media had always portrayed survivors or survivors to be these broken people in society. And I was like, well, that's not me, and I don't want to be like that. So I'm just going to keep being as successful and just have another project and another project and another project. So hopefully no one ever needs to know that I am carrying this really toxic trauma that I need to work on, but I don't want to think about it, because if I just add another thing to my plate, then I can ignore it for a little bit longer. So it's been an incredibly powerful journey. But I still come across people that knew me back then, and they're just fascinated with the fact that the person they saw in front of them, be it as a teenager or as whatever stage of life they've known me in, as I said, prior to 4 years ago, no one knew a thing. So it's just huge for people to get their heads around it, how many layers and how many masks we can wear, and people don't know what's happening behind closed doors.
Thank you so much for obviously sharing that part, because, like you say, 4 years ago, I mean, that's very recent, in as much as you've been carrying this with you all this while. And I'd like to say this with utmost love and respect, that it's it's not it's not something that's meant to be happening. That 30% is one too many, and if we're looking at it, it still is your story, and you're bringing it to the table. But you did mention the people that were around did nothing. Is that still the case?
I think we need to put that into some context. So the reality is, when it comes to child sexual abuse and the grooming that happens in that environment, the grooming doesn't only happen to the child. So the behavior of grooming, when we hear about it, we think that it is an adult and a child, and they are the only kind of people in the scenario. But the grooming actually occurs to everyone in that environment, especially the people closest to the child. So the perpetrator will gain trust and will start almost creating a wedge between the child and their trusted people. They will isolate the child. There's a range of behaviours that happen, and it's not. It doesn't tend to, well, in the case of child sexual abuse that occurs over a period of time, it's not opportunistic in the sense of the kind of violent attacks we hear of more as adults. Someone walking down the street, or something happens, or at a nightclub or whatever. That kind of sexual abuse is very different to child sexual abuse that has grooming as its foundation. So the reason I share that is because it creates context for the other people at that point in time. So when a perpetrator has been able to convince all of the people in the environment, and that could be 3 people, that could be 10, 15, like, families are big, right? So when a perpetrator can create a sense of trust, can easily deflect conversations, they're a master manipulator. And so, though, yes, in theory, no one did anything, the years and years of manipulation, it's very hard to break. And so I have a lot of compassion for the people and the adults that are in my life, or were in my life as a child, and who had a duty of care, but also didn't really know any better. That's another reason why I speak about these topics, because as adults now, we have more information. We have a responsibility to use what we have and to create safer spaces for children, and to listen to our gut instinct and to call out behavior, which is really hard to do. So I share when we're in environments where a child might be uncomfortable, or they might not want to give an adult a hug, or they might not want to say hello. And out of tradition and out of politeness, we will make children sit on someone's lap. We would make children say hello to someone, or give them a hug, or give them a kiss on the cheek, or whatever. And the more that we do that, the more we create an opportunity, one, for a child to get to the point where they believe that all they need to do is to behave, and their voice is never going to be heard, and they're never going to be advocated for, because in their body they're uncomfortable, but they've been told that they have to ignore that to be a polite child. And in return, it creates environments where people that are going to do harm, and I'm not saying that everyone that wants to give a child a hug or a kiss or whatever is trying to do harm, but the people that are trying to do harm take those opportunities and say, oh, well, that's just the environment that I'm in. And so they create that more, and they push that more, and they push the boundaries more. And so now that we have more information around grooming and around those types of behaviors, and how we can better empower children to be safe and create safe spaces for them, that's what we should be doing. And so I guess to go back to your question, around what people did or didn't do, and how I feel about that. Yes, I wish that more had been done at many points in my life, not even just when I was 10, but do I have an understanding of what that means for people today? Yes, because the reality is, when abuse happens in the family, it is the most complex type of abuse, because it creates a real difficult situation where people have to choose. They have to choose between a loved one and a loved one. And they also have to then acknowledge their role in ignoring the behavior or not speaking up. And that's a lot of responsibility. So unfortunately, in the time that I've been speaking, there haven't been many people that have come forward and kind of apologized, or wish they, or even told me that they wish they had known more or did more or whatever. Because to do that will take a lot of unpacking of their own understanding and their own responsibility. And that is a very hard thing to do, especially for the generation I'm talking about, who are now in their 60s and 70s.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for putting that in perspective, because as you say, fish do not see the water that they're swimming in, and neither can we see the air that we're breathing. And if something is just seemingly happening in and around us, and obviously it's going undetected, or whichever way, what are some of the things that you might encourage people to be on the lookout for? Not that they're going to be all Sherlock Holmes to every other uncle that comes at a barbecue, or every other auntie that comes at a barbecue, but what should people be on the lookout for, especially when it comes to noticing their kids?
I would definitely say the first thing before they even get to the barbecue is to empower their children. So empower them with language. So please don't use cutesy words for genitalia, like use real words. Empower them with language, and empower them with an understanding of why certain parts of our bodies are private, and that even if someone is a family member or a trusted person, so that may not be blood family, but they could be, someone's best friend that child has been around their whole life. It doesn't matter who the person is. If you are feeling unsafe, there are safe adults that you can speak to. So if uncle, grandpa, whoever, if that person is making you uncomfortable, then please come and speak to me, or who are your safe adults? So having those conversations beforehand, helping them identify who their safe adults are and why. What is it about that person that makes the child feel safe? And they're going to have different relationships with different adults in their lives. So because the reality is they could go to person one and person one could be like, oh, that you're just being silly. Like, he didn't mean anything by that. So if the child knows they have multiple safe adults and they have more people to turn to. Now, the reality is the moment they're shut down by person one, they may stop talking. And that's why survivors take so long to speak, because the moment we're shut down once, it takes us decades at times to speak up. But if, as a child, you are empowered with language, you know that it doesn't matter who the person is, that there are safe adults that you can talk to, you know which parts of your body are yours and only yours. And then the other part is helping children understand how feelings and intuition shows up in their body. So is it butterflies in your tummy? Is it feeling sickly? Are your palms sweaty? Do you feel like the hair on the back of your neck is standing up? Do you just feel a bit icky? And the way that makes you feel, and then relating that to other things. So when this happens, my body does this, and when this happens, my body does this, because your body tells you. Our bodies tell us as adults. Like, you can meet someone and it doesn't quite feel right, and you just avoid that person because we're adults and that's what we do. We just bypass the situation. But even as adults now, if we're nervous or we are scared or we don't feel safe, our bodies tell us in really visceral ways. And so telling children that they're just being shy or they're just a bit nervous or whatever is disempowering them to listen to their bodies. So having all those kind of building those conversations up with your children before you get anywhere. And that takes time. It needs to become part of common language in a household. And then, yes, in a setting, it is a case of being your child's advocate. So children are little, and we still live in a society where children are still a little bit of that mind. Well, we are still of that mindset a bit, that children should be seen and not heard, and they need to listen to the adults, they need to do this. And I understand that in the context, like, I have children and I understand what it's like to have children just running around and not behaving. But when your gut instinct tells you, because you feel the same instinct your child does normally, you can normally pick it up pretty quickly, especially as they're your child and you know what they behave like normally when they meet people. So empower them and advocate for them and say, actually, he doesn't really want to give you a hug. So he's just going to wave and say hello from there. And if that auntie, uncle person kicks up a big stink, then just let them throw their little tantrum about how, it's so rude. And, oh, children these days, they don't even say hello to people, and they don't, just let them have their moment. Like, because they don't have to support your child. You have to take your child home and continue to build that trust. You're going to see auntie next year at the barbecue, and you can just deal with auntie next time, sort of thing. Your child is more important, and that trust and relationship is more important. So, and I come from a traditional family where you kiss people on both cheeks, and when you arrive, and then when there's like 100 people, you have to say hello and goodbye to 100 people. It takes a long time, but yeah, the reality is you have to stand up for your child and be the voice for them so they know that you've got their back.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. I mean, obviously, I'm a dad of two gorgeous girls, and the last thing I would want is to have to deal with something like this. And obviously, just having an awareness of, if just in case something like that might be happening, or is quite important. Like I said, so many people are oblivious to what's right under their nose. Now, if the home environment, you did mention, fail safe and adults and things of that nature, if the home environment may not have been quick to react, what was the school life like?
As in my scenario, or?
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I had almost trained myself from the moment the abuse started that I was a good girl that got good grades and went to school and performed. No one knew. So I think what's interesting is, and one of the things I advocate for now, is that teachers should have more training to look out for behavioural changes in children. Now, teachers have a lot on their plate, and I have so much absolute respect for teachers. They already have enough going on. So I understand asking them to do yet another piece of training is yet another thing. But this one's pretty important, right? And I think now we're in a position where teachers will probably have better understanding of the things to look out for. It could be like sometimes we see children that their behavior goes from them participating in classes and they go really quiet, or sometimes they, normally they're just, your average kid, and now they're getting in trouble all the time, or they don't want to come to school, or they don't want to leave. They don't want to go home. Like they make excuses they almost get detention so they can stay back after school because they don't want to go home. There's so many different ways. And I'd love to say that there's like this list of like textbook things that kids do at school. But the reality is every child's going to be different. And in my case, I flew under the radar because I was so determined to be as normal as possible so no one would ever know what was happening to me at home, that I was just a really good actor, and eventually you just believe the story, right? So you just do the next thing and the next thing. So it was primary school, then it was high school, then it was, went off and started my career, and I was always really hardworking and really determined. But I'm sure there were some telltale signs if anyone was really paying attention, but it was also the 90s. Like, you got away with a lot in the 1990s. And I, dabbled with drugs and alcohol and a range of things that I was doing at a very, very early age. And they were very clear warning signs. But once again, like, because of the time of my life, people are like, oh, she's just acting out like a rebellious teenager. And so they just put it down to that. And so I was like, okay, good. I've got another excuse. I don't need to dive into any of that other stuff, which is why I'm really doing this. But yeah, I think with the right people paying attention and asking the right questions, I'm sure someone would have been able to uncover more. I do say, though, that the reality is, once again, when there is abuse that's happening in a family setting, it can it can be extra complicated. So we hear about abuse situations where it's been through a school or a church or a sporting group or whatever, and that person is external to the household. So removing them from the person's life and whatever else is easier to do, but moving a child out of their own home is very complex. So I'm sure that there was a part of, maybe if we don't see what we can actually see, then we don't have to deal with the very significant ripple effect of what happens to this child after.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Caroline, because I think you're really shedding light to both sides of the coin. I mean, obviously, home environment, school environment, and whatever that is happening now. I'm going to say this with utmost love and respect. You took on, the drug side of things, and still nobody noticed. Now, do you think the journey that you then took, which was success after success after success, that was also yet another escape, because you did not maybe want the person that didn't have that, because you associated everything else that had happened to you as the biggest failure anybody could ever experience.
Yeah, and you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. I tried all the numbing techniques of like the ones, as you said, like substance abuse. I tried that really early, much earlier than most teenagers do. And then I just worked out that that wasn't sustainable long term, because I was having issues with it. Like, it was causing me issues at school, and I was getting in trouble and whatever else. And I was almost drawing more attention to myself. And I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. So I don't know, I don't think it was ever a conscious thought, but I worked out very quickly that if I could just become really busy and really organized and be the first person to put my hand up for any project and then another project, and Now, these became traits that I then went on to turn into an incredibly successful career. And I laugh about it now that, and I've shared this with people in the past, that I'm like, my entire business, my previous business that I've just recently sold, was built on a trauma mechanism. Like, now that I know that, it's, I think, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know. It's just a thing, right? But yeah, my numbing technique became overworking myself and taking on as much as I could, because the busier I was, the less I had to face how I was feeling on the inside. And the older I got, the harder it got, because then I went on to have children of my own. That caused another kind of ripple effect on the inside of like navigating what it was like to be a parent, but not to have healed, and a range of things that were happening in my life. And every time it was like, if I just keep really busy, then I don't have to do any of the internal work. And I became known for it. I was just, and even now it's funny because I seem like I do a lot. I'm very good at the optics of success now, and we can talk about that more. But the reality is, I am so grounded, and I'm not actually all that busy in the sense of being busy to be busy, because I know that it's just another form of substance abuse for me. It's another form of numbing. And I really have to check in with myself today, and before I put my hand up and say yes to something or whatever else, and like, is this aligned with what I'm trying to do? What am I saying no to? And how full is my cup as such, before I say yes to this thing? Because if I don't have overflow, then I can't do the thing, because I know how important it is to be looking after myself. But yeah, what was originally drugs and alcohol and just really poor behavior, very quickly in my early 20s turned into workaholic, multiple things on the go at any given time, and to the point where I just didn't even have time for friends and family, or loved ones, because then if they got too close, that was another thing. So I was just always busy, but busy to the outside world looks like success. And so every time I did more, people just applauded me and gave me more to do.
You would have loved Easter then, because you know those Easter bunny chocolates? The chocolate is
Mm.
just on the outside, but inside is like a really big hole in there.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Um, and for me, it was probably more like those babushka dolls. Like, there's a doll, and there's like another Caroline and another Caroline. Eventually, there's like a tiny Caroline that still has a hole inside because she's so small. But you had to get through all the versions of. It wasn't just like one layer. It was, oh, okay, we're going to get to this and this. And it took years. Like, there are people that I now have had in my life for years and have relationships with, but they're just saying to me now, they're like, it's really, really interesting being your friend today and watching being around you and just knowing that this is it, this is you. Like, there's no other layers. There's nothing, like, we just get you. And that's beautiful, because you don't have to show up with 50 million other babushka dolls on the layers, right?
Mm, absolutely. And I quite like this. And also, I really appreciate you being on the show today. I mean, like you said, you now pick and choose where you go, and you sure decided to be on the Online Prosperity Show with us today. And if you're watching right now, this is your cue to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show, because you never know what insightful content you might come across. Now, back to the show. You obviously have had your fair share of success. I mean, obviously, anyone can Google that and they can come across that, but that you were not documenting, that what we're talking about here today is not on Google. So I'm hoping this now, sort of creates that, yin and yang to everything else, that people can see on the outside and decide which side they want to resonate with, because that really puts you in a different pedestal and different position. Because so many people, Caroline, go on a weekend, walk over some hot coals, and then on their way back from that, buy a laptop, and then they come telling people they're a coach. But you've had lived experience, and that's completely different, because you're speaking from a place of knowing having been there. All right. And pretty much now you're showing people how to roadmap that journey. But while we are on that course in 2020, while everybody else was busy coughing in their elbows, you had a major shift that actually then led you to step into this role of being the survivor coach. Can you maybe share a little bit about
Yeah.
this event?
Yeah, definitely. I think if I went back to 2020, Caroline, and said, you're going to be a survivor coach, I would be like, that's a terrible idea. Don't do that. And not because I don't love the work. I I think back to that person and what I was about to do, which is essentially turn my entire life upside down, literally a month before the pandemic hit as well. So it wasn't the best timing to decide to turn my life upside down, but that's okay. Like we survived through, and it's not like I hadn't done hard things before. So pandemic was just another thing. But um, when I look back to that point in time, for me, what was most important was doing my own work. So really understanding what it looked like to take the title of being a survivor, to further look into the work that I wanted to do on my healing journey at that point. And I say that because I'm in my early 40s. I have done many different types of healing in my lifetime. I've been to different therapists and psychologists and courses and whatever. It isn't like I was 10 and then I was 40 and then nothing happened in between. Like a whole life happened and lots of different types of healing along the way. But in 2020, I definitely took a different route and I started speaking publicly, firstly to family members and then more broader. And then I decided to write my memoir in 2020. Well, I self-published my memoir in 2022. So I was writing by late 2020, I had started writing and started that process. But when I think about the person I was and the healing that I needed to do, I think it was really important because it helped me identify how I wanted to support the survivor community. There were definitely times where I was considering becoming a psychologist or becoming a therapist or working at a trauma clinic or so many different routes because there are such a beautiful array of supporters out there, and all the way from clinicians to somatic yoga and Reiki healing and like all end spectrum sort of thing. And what was funny is in my time as in my career, I had spent a lot of time in different types of coaching capacities. So I had I in different businesses, people had said, I'd really love you to coach me. And I'd kind of been like, well, I'm not a coach. Like that's not what I do. And it was because I really wanted to make sure that I wanted to have the right skills and also the right boundaries and parameters around what I did and didn't do, because I was mindful of if I wanted to be a coach in this space, that I needed to ensure that I wasn't going to create more harm. Survivors come to this work, or survivors that I work with, they come to me and they know why. My title is the survivor coach. Like we're not playing games here. We know what we're talking about. And so I needed to be really clear where I stood in their journey and what type of work that I did. And so I guess the key point of difference is, as a coach, I don't work with people that are in an active state of trauma. And I also don't work with people who specifically are looking for something where they can talk about the past or do some kind of talk therapy that's going to be unpacking the past. There are incredible people that do that specific type of work, but it is not where my specialty is. And I'm also not trained to do that work. Where I meet people is where we are today, right in the present, and I help them move into the future. So the majority of the things that I focus on are communication, boundaries, and identifying your values so you can work out how to make all of those things integrate together. And the reality is the common threads that I see with the clients that I work with now, and even when I think about back to that person I was in 2020, was lack of boundaries, no understanding of how to communicate them, and not really even knowing what my values were, because they were so tied into the person I was trying to be by masking, by being busy, by being that overworker and numbing myself. So all of my values were based on how do I just keep surviving versus what do I really want for myself, and how do I unpack that and bring all of myself in, the hard bits, the wonderful bits, all of the parts, and bring that wholeness back together. So now that's what I do with my clients. It's a really beautiful space to be in, because we focus on the present. We can't change the past. So let's work on where we are now and where we want to be moving forward, because we've got so much opportunity there. So it's a really beautiful space to work in. And I think to all those people that in the past have said, oh, I'd love you to be my coach, they probably saw something in me in the way that I communicate and the empathy I had for people, because I've always had such deep empathy, because I've known what it's like to walk through the world and carry some really heavy things. So they probably saw something in me that I maybe didn't have the confidence to really see in myself. So it's lovely to be in this space now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, like we were saying, you've been there, done it all, and now you've wrote a memoir. More than one thing can be true. Congratulations. First of
Thank
all, tell us, since you hadn't done the work, what was it like having to redo it all over again?
you. It was very therapeutic. I can't say that writing in general is always going to be therapeutic. Some people will find it that way, and it's a memoir, so it's not like it's a different type of book. But I say that, but it's also part research. So it is something that I wrote at the time to share parts of my story, but also gain an understanding of why things were the way that they were. And so I go on lots of different tangents around researching and understanding trauma and how it impacts the mind of a child and a teenager, to understanding epigenetics and how trauma impacts our DNA, and it actually changes to a certain extent our DNA, and how that can cause generational trauma. I just talk about humankind, and how we've in different cultures have had some form of human sacrifice at different points, and how even when I think about your question earlier about family members that didn't do anything, sometimes we sacrifice people so we can keep the peace, right? So we sacrifice children and their safety so we can just get through the day. And it's really sad to think about it from that perspective, but we see people being sacrificed all the time. It happens in meetings. Like you see someone kind of being spoken to in a way that you don't really think's okay, but if you say something, then that brings the attention to you, so you let that slide and whatever. And so I explore lots of different topics around the broader spectrum of abuse and trauma, whilst weaving my story throughout that. And I talk about child safety and a range of other things. So it's funny, because looking back now, because there's so much growth that happens in any period of time, but 2 years is a long time since I self-published, and obviously more than 2 years since I started writing. There's definitely elements of that where I'm like, oh, look at that people pleaser that I was like, I need to have research in it and whatever, which is like, and I have no regrets of that, because I love the way that I've structured the memoir. But I do think if I was to write it now, maybe there'd be less of that, and maybe there'd be more of my story. Who knows? But it's all learning, right? It's such a beautiful process. And I think for me, and this is the case for many authors, the moment you hit publish and it's an actual thing, it's actually in many ways not yours anymore. It's the person that, like, I have people that reach out and they say, oh, this chapter or this sentence or this thing, and first of all, I'm like, oh, did I say that? That's great. Which happens sometimes, but it's more just how what I intended may not be what they receive. And that's completely okay, because it's their experience of taking those words and applying them to their own lived experience, which is a really beautiful thing. But yeah, very therapeutic, an incredible achievement in the sense of just actually writing a book is hard, and then like having the guts to back yourself and self-publish, and then promote it, and it's all you. Like, you've got to do the work to get the word out there, and then you've just got to hope that people pick it up and read it.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a tremendous gift that you've given people. I mean, your life story and your experience have just so much that people can learn from and pick apart and put together and try and also go on that journey themselves. I mean, like you say, there's so many people that are going through this, yet the people around them are either being groomed, like you're saying. So it just creates this whole, cocktail of toxicity that people are leaving around. And,
Mm.
when you then give them a book, it really puts everything in the open. And thank you. Thank you for going
Thank
through
you.
this and for putting it all together. And I know I'm in the process of writing a book myself. And every time I look at the computer and I see that, cursor going on and
Blinking
off, I'm
curse.
just like, maybe it's broken. I'll come back again when it's not blinking, and you did it.
Yeah, it feels a bit like that sometimes, definitely. It is a process. Like, I have so much respect for authors, because it's just, when you've done it, you're like, oh my goodness, that was hard.
Absolutely. Well, how can maybe people get a hold of this memoir?
Yeah, so if they jump on my website, which is carolinebrunne.com, if they purchase it through my website, they get a signed copy. But there's also links to kind of all the other places you can get it. So you can get it from, your Amazons or Booktopias and that sort of stuff. I have a copy on Audible and other audio versions that I narrate. So you get to hear my voice for 8 something hours. And there's also the ebook version. So you can find links to all of that on my website.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that those links are in the show notes so that people can get a hold of you. Now, Caroline, when people go through stuff in life, they usually curl fetal position, woe is me, I need to feel okay before I even go out. But you've literally started, creating for and relating to others that are going through this, and you're showcasing to them that they're not alone. And one unique aspect of your work is actually creating that peer support space for trauma survivors, because you realize maybe growing up, you didn't have that. Had you had that, maybe your life would have been a whole lot different. And how has this sort of community impacted maybe you personally and obviously the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, that is such a good way of describing it, because it is so true. I think back to my childhood self and genuinely thinking I was the only person in the world that this was happening to. And then I think to, my teenage self, or, me in my early 20s, and the shame that I carried because I genuinely didn't want anyone to know. And again, thinking I was one of the only ones, and the only examples I had of stories that were anywhere near similar to mine were in the media. And they were either news articles that were really sensationalized, or they were movies. And movies aren't designed to not be dramatic. Like, that's the point of a movie or a TV show. So I only had these examples that weren't my story, that I couldn't relate to. In addition to the fact that I didn't have any stories of people that looked like me. So the reality is, growing up as an immigrant in Australia, especially in the 80s and 90s, no one looked like me on TV and in the media. So add that to the mix, and it's a whole nother conversation. So that peer support, or understanding that there were others like me, created another layer of shame and silence, because I felt another layer of being alone. What I've found in the past, more than the last 4 years, because in in my adult life, I've definitely had moments where I've shared with small groups of people or in certain settings, and as I said, 30% is really high. So you can normally find someone that has some form of lived experience similar to you. And the sigh out, that real sigh of relief of just knowing that there's almost this automatic safety that gets created. That's how I feel about it. I know it's different for others, but it's similar to what people of color feel when they walk into an event and they're the only one, and then they spot someone on the other side of the room that looks like them, and it's like, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. It gives you this, you might not even talk to that person that on that day, but you just feel a little bit safer, a little bit more, or you feel less alone. And it's tricky in this scenario because it's not like I'm walking around with a sign on my forehead. Like, you can see my skin color, but you can't see my trauma. And so what I have found in the last few years, as I have been speaking publicly, and I'm a speaker, I have my book and whatever else, and this is what I talk about on social media. So people find me, and if they find my work, is then people reach out, and I have this quite virtual online style community of peers now. And sometimes when I'm having a bad day, they're actually the people I call on. I might just send someone a DM or whatever else, and just share how I'm feeling or what's going on. And some of these people I still haven't met in real life. They're just people that I know they get it. We have similar passions for the advocacy work that we do. We have similar challenges around our trauma and how it shows up in our body and causes a range of issues for us. But one of the things I'm really passionate about is finding more of that and making it more accessible. So it is my new project, and it's the next thing I plan to be doing, is creating a peer support organisation. And that's purely what we're going to do. We're going to have peer support meetings and catch-ups in person. It's not going to have a clinical overtone to it. So a lot of the peer support groups that exist, there might be a psychologist or a counsellor that runs the session, and that's okay. They also serve their purpose. As I'm not a clinician, but the most structure it's going to have is me as facilitator and coach, but we may just be having a peer support catch up to do an activity together or whatever else, knowing that the common thread between all of us is that we are all survivors of child sexual abuse, but that we can be in space with each other and just be friends and just have a commonality that that helps us understand that if someone shows up and you can tell they're not having a great day, that you don't even need to speak about what happened to them as a child, because we're talking about the present, right? Why do they have a bad day today? But you know that they're carrying just that little bit extra. When I think about when this has been done really well, I think about, cancer support groups, or people that have support groups if they've grieved, like had a miscarriage or grieved a loved one or whatever else. Like, though they might not sit and talk about the thing, knowing that the other people in the room understand what they've gone through just helps you breathe out. It's a sigh of relief. So that is what I'm building at the moment. It is very behind the scenes and very early days. I'm hoping to kind of have a few things out in the next month or so. I'm just taking my time with it to work out exactly what I want it to look like. But if I can create a virtual peer support or like network because of what I speak about, I know there are people out there who would just really love to just sit and have a cup of coffee with someone and just chat about the day, but know that if something's coming up for them, that they can talk with someone that gets it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you keep talking about sighing a lot. And, I kind of resonate, when you mentioned, when you walk into a room, you just scan the room, and if you see somebody who looks similarly like you, because representation matters, you know what I mean? You don't want to be just that one person. So I can imagine if you were not seeing somebody that was looking like you in the media or something like that, you would have actually just thought that That's what people like me are supposed to go through then, maybe.
Mm.
I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. And I talk a lot about representation and that theory of you can't be what you can't see. And I've said that so many times in a business setting and like in my kind of in the depths of my hustle entrepreneurial life, the amount of times I've shared that because I've had people say, oh, it's so great to see, a Mauritian woman or a woman of color and she's like on Sunrise or doing this or whatever else. I'm like, yeah, because I didn't see people like me on the TV. So any opportunity, I say yes to every opportunity because it just means that there are kids that look like me that are going through this. And if they can one day come across my content and know that there's other people out there that are talking about this and they aren't alone, and that is sad in itself. Like we don't want more people to go through this, but the reality is that's not going to change anytime soon. It's just the world that we live in right now. So yeah, you can't be what you can't see as a inspirational leader or entrepreneur or whatever, but you also can't be what you can't see when it comes to survival and thriving and being a whole person and acknowledging the hardest parts of your life, but also acknowledging that you still get to live and you get to choose how you do that. And you get to really show up for yourself whilst acknowledging that you are carrying your trauma and asking for the things you need so you can continue to carry it and continue to take steps forward. And if I can be an example of that for others, then my work here is done.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I can't wait to celebrate that with you because I mean, obviously, the work that you're doing, you're literally giving people back to themselves, because somebody has gone through all this and now they probably don't see themselves as worthy, and like you went on and started just piling up things that would then seemingly make you look worth. And now you just saying, hey, more than one thing can be true. Here's a
Mm.
peer group that people can hang around and we can all know that we are heading somewhere. What has been the most sort of rewarding outcomes of your journey so far? And how has it sort of maybe impacted you and your life and who you've become?
I think the most rewarding part has been a real self-acceptance and knowing and self-power that I have managed to really believe. So I think for a really big part of my life, I knew that I was strong and brave and powerful and all those words because I had gotten through some really hard stuff and I was still here and I was still on my feet and I was still doing great things. But because my intention was never like it was all they were always a distraction. And as you described just now, like that it's one thing to feel worthy from the inside, but it's another for people to constantly tell you you're worthy because you're succeeding. So everything had been such an external validation. But now, regardless of what I'm doing, I know that I hold my power and I know that I hold my truth. And that is a gift because I can go do something incredible and be super excited about it, but I can also sit in my own company and not feel uncomfortable. And that was something I really struggled with. I struggled to be on my own. I struggled to sit still because the longer I sat still, the harder it would become because I would have to face all the things that show up when you're still and you're quiet. So definitely the biggest accomplishment and the thing that I'm most proud of, and probably the thing that confuses people the most that have known me for decades. They're like, why are you just so still and quiet and at peace? I'm like, I know it's weird, right? Like the super organized, hyper busy person who now just is quite happy to just sit in silence and make people uncomfortable. But it's a really beautiful space to be in. And it's something that I really try and gift to people, the power of that stillness and knowing that you can have that worthiness and stillness inside yourself and know that it's yours, because then no one can take it away, which is the other part of it being a superpower.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, looking at where you've been and who you've become, it's just proof in and of itself that you've done the work. I mean, we've been sitting here for over an hour now, and you haven't started kicking me under the table there to say, hey, it's about
Well, you're very good at keeping me talking. You're doing a good job.
fantastic. Now, obviously, you've done the work, and you've gotten what the success that you, like you say, outwardly got. But I think now you've got that inner success, and it shows, because most of the things that we were talking about, somebody would have really not wanted to keep going ahead with this conversation. Now, if you would maybe go back to maybe a certain point in your younger life while you were doing all these things, like you said, the whole people pleasing and things of that nature, and you would just give advice to your younger self, or younger you gets to watch this video right now, what would you say to that girl?
Oh, I've had these thoughts many, many times. But I think, and it's something I actually say to myself a lot now as an adult, is you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. In the hardest day, in the hardest, most traumatic, abusive moment. Not that I would wish that on myself again or wish that on anyone. Or when I've made very poor decisions and done things that I really shouldn't have done that weren't good for my body, mind, soul, all of it. I know that every moment has had a purpose, and I have so much deep respect for my younger self, because regardless of what she was subjected to and had no control over, all the decisions she made that were poor and probably should have been better, she survived every one of those moments, like every single one, and just kept getting back up again and kept looking for more answers and never really giving up. And I'm just really proud of her. Like I have so much respect. If you could bottle that kind of tenacity and resilience and grit and sell it to people, I'd be a billionaire if I could just like make that a thing, like a self-help book kind of, here's the little pill that you swallow and you get to it. It's a kind of, yeah, I'm fascinated by that. And I know that that is what drives me now. And I love the fact that I still carry that as an adult. But there have definitely been times where my younger self has had to, yeah, do things and survive things that no one should ever have to survive. And so if I was to see her today, I would just tell her that she is exactly where she needs to be. And I'm really, really proud that she's going to get through it.
Thank you. I mean, to whom much is given, much is required. Had that been given to anyone else, I don't think we would have had such a remarkable episode like we did today. So, what I've just learned from all of this is, if something is happening to you, just pay close attention, because one day you'll have a good story to tell.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
appreciate that. See, for me, I have days where I maybe break a nail, or, I cut myself shaving, and that whole day I'm flat. I can't even do anything. I can't even nurse my kids or whatever it is that needs happening. I can't even pick them up from school. They have to walk because, I'm going through stuff. So I can only imagine, after having gone through all of that, and you still sending the elevator down so that others can also
Mm.
do and have a happier existence. So I think, I don't know whether you believe in God, the universe, or whatever it is. I think you're doing God's work.
Thank you.
This is what a lot of bigger people should have been doing, should have done, but now you're bringing it home for a lot more people.
Mm.
Thank you. But
Thank
now that people have gotten to know the Caroline You know, like I was joking earlier on that we need to play that Destiny's Child. I'm
It's
gonna
a good
do.
song. I'll give you that.
What can people expect? What can people expect in the future? You know,
Mm.
what's now that we are on this path, we not looking at the past, we're going into the future. And I just want people to wear those eclipse glasses, because I think what you're about to say is just gonna blind them, you know, with excitement, and it's gonna be so bright because I can see that future myself even.
I see the work that I'm doing is creating another space for survivors to find themselves, find them their sense of home in themselves, and a trust and a knowing and a power that can never be taken away again. And if I can support that as their coach to create a container where they can explore that and trust that they are safely held while they bounce around in the mess that is the exploration of who they are today and who they want to be, then that would be an absolute honor. And it is what I get to do with my clients now. And just watching that transformation is nothing short of remarkable. In addition to that, because that is not for everyone, that is big work. Like, it's the biggest kind of work, right? Um, Another feather in my cap as such is the breathwork facilitator work that I'm doing now. And that is really at that ground level. It is the deep work that is actually very easy to access. So um, I am now doing one-on-one sessions and group sessions here on the Gold Coast for in-person work. And then I'll soon be launching some online sessions for people that are all around the country or international, which will be really beautiful to share. And so far, like, it's a very early thing for me. I've only just released that as an offering, and in the very, like, literally in the last fortnight, I've had people that have had their first session and then booked 5 more, sort of thing, because the transformation of having the breathwork experience but also being held by a survivor coach, the survivor coach, is quite transformational for them. So another beautiful offering that really complements the coaching, but in a very, very different way. And yeah, definitely watch the space. I am very soon to be launching the peer support community, and we'll be starting with free events. So free in-person events where people can just come and be, and very community oriented. Bring a plate and come and share and come and hang out for the afternoon. And then we'll probably do some breath work to kind of ground us into the space. And then we'll just hang out for a couple of hours and just be able to chat with someone about what's happening in your life right now. And that is all. There's no clinical overtone. It's about being in community with survivors who understand what it feels like to live in this world today, and know that you're actually not alone, because you can't be what you can't see. So let's all see each other and be together.
Fantastic. Now, Caroline, I can't thank you enough for the time and the journey you took us on this particular episode today. I mean, obviously, if somebody came here looking for tips to survive in the African jungle, or, tips to survive that reality TV show.
Yeah, I'm not that survivor coach. Like, that's a completely different type of survivor coach. Like, I'm pretty fit, but I don't know if I'd make it on that show.
It's not about eating worms or putting your head in a box full of bees. No, it wasn't any of that. That was your life story and your experience, and how you're sending the elevator down for others to be, do, and have a happier existence and a safer environment, which most of the people around them seemingly choose to ignore, like you said, because they don't want to sever the ties that they have
Mm.
with the people around them. So thank you so much, Caroline. I mean, obviously sharing your incredible journey with us today. Your story is just a testament to the power of resilience and transformation. And I can't thank you enough for the time we spent on the call today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here and holding space.
Absolutely. For our viewers, I know this was a long one, but you can understand the weight of this issue. And if things are happening around us, I want and urge us to really open our eyes to, what our kids are going through. The kids are not okay out there just because, the people we think are supposed to be looking after them are also, showering us with gifts and taking us on holidays just to distract us from the real thing. Let's start paying attention. And if you found this episode as inspiring as I did, I encourage you to maybe rewatch this or send it to somebody who's going through stuff or has gone through stuff. Maybe this might be that thing they need in order for them to get to the next level. As you have noticed, Caroline is here to bring people back to themselves and really have an understanding and heal, because what they would have gone through, they shouldn't go through at first of all alone, and second of all continuously go through it. And don't forget to check out Caroline's memoir, More Than One Thing Can Be True. And also be on the lookout for her coaching packages, if you're ready to embark on your own journey of healing and empowerment. And if you've watched up until this part, please type in the words survivor. I think Caroline will be happy to know that there are other survivors out there, and maybe she can reach out and maybe connect with you. Type in the word survivor if you need Caroline to reach out to you. But remember, maybe just rewatch this episode again and share it with somebody who's going through stuff. Until next time, keep thriving and make your dreams a reality. Bye for now.
I'm Caroline Brunne. I am a lived experience expert, a survivor coach, an author, and also a public speaker. Some people may choose to use their research for their lived experience, but I combine these two elements as well as my entrepreneurial skills to bring a range of topics to audiences both in the corporate environment as well as small community groups. It can be uncomfortable as we discuss the topics around trauma. So with my trauma-informed training, I create a safe space for audiences so they can gain key insights whilst walking through that journey. In addition to this, I believe that I am proof of life beyond trauma. I am conscious and very insightful in the way that I believe that we all have the power to be our own inspiration leader. As we take our highlight reel, but also the darker, deeper moments of our lives and look for that leader within, embody our whole selves and show up in both our life and our business.